Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen we're making some easy, delicious sausage stuffing. So let's get started. First off, preheat your oven to 300 degrees. I have a big loaf of bread here. This is the basis of our stuffing, but we need to dry it out. After, we cut it into 1-inch cubes. You want about 1 pound of bread for this recipe, or 12 cups, and you can use any bread you like. Today I'm using an Italian loaf. You could use white sandwich bread, a baguette, cornbread. It's really up to you and what you have available. A lot of people think of stuffing as something that gets stuffed into the bird, but you should really think about it as a savory bread pudding. There's a sweet bread pudding, and you could have like a creme anglaise on top, and it's like, crunchy on the outside, really crisp and buttery, and on the inside, it's soft and custardy. This is the same thing, except it's savory. So we have lovely notes of fresh herbs, celery, onions, garlic, and of course the sausage to give you tons of flavor. And you don't want to bake it in a bird. That's not going to let the bird bake evenly, and it's not necessarily food safe. You want to bake this in a baking dish so it gets a beautiful, crusty, crunchy top. All sliced up, now we can start cubing. And this bread is pretty fresh. It's just too soft right now. It would kind of dissolve once we add our chicken stock. So we're gonna dry this out in the oven at 300 degrees. And by the way, dried bread cubes or dried bread slices are a delicious snack to have. My grandparents always had a big glass canister of dried bread, and you'd have that with olives and feta and tomato. It's delicious. And clearly, my grandfather was Greek. As you go, just toss it onto a baking sheet, and you're probably gonna use 2 baking sheets for this recipe, just because you don't wanna pile the bread up. It should be in an even layer so it really dries out evenly. Depending on how soft and fresh the bread you're using is, you might notice that as you cut it, even with the sharpest serrated knife, it just kind of dissolves into like a little mushy cloud. In this case, feel free to tear the bread. It'll give you less compressed pieces. Give your bread some room to breathe. You don't want to crowd it out. And now this can bake at 300 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes or until it's nice and dried out. And halfway through the bake, you're gonna want to like move them around, just like when you're toasting nuts, so they can dry out evenly. In you go. While our bread's drying out, we have a little bit of prep work to do. So I want 2 cups of onion. That could be 1 mega onion or a couple smaller ones. We're gonna give them a dice. It doesn't have to be too precious. This is a rustic, delicious, savory bread pudding. By the way, if you like my, kidding. By the way, if you like my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. There's 2 new recipes every single week. I got you. Let's measure that out. It doesn't matter if it's a little under or a little over. You're not making a souffle. It's just about the flavor. Today, I'm going for a yacht of onions, but 2 cups is fine. Pop this into a bowl just so it's ready for later. Now I want 2 cups of diced celery. Just cut it down the middle. Celery is so underrated, by the way. It actually has a lot of flavor. And those poor farmers, it's actually quite difficult to grow. As someone with a little garden myself, celery needs a ton of water. Give it a nice dice. I could tell it's about 2 cups. We also want 4 cloves of garlic, and yes, you could add more if you want as well. Think of it as a general guideline. My one piece of advice is just to buy a regular old head of garlic and do all the prep work yourself. Do not be tempted by those pre-peeled garlics. I'm not gonna tell you why, but your friends might. Give this a nice mince. Today I'm giving mine a rustic mince. Don't judge me. This stuffing would be quite sad if we didn't add some fresh herbs. So let's grab 2 tablespoons of fresh sage and give it a chop. Mind your fingers. Just the leaves, not the stems. I also would like a 1/4 cup of fresh flat-leafed parsley. Parsley is such a nice herb. It has a lovely vegetal flavor, and it is also very underrated. People think of it sometimes as just a garnish. That's curly leaf parsley, which is waxier and in my opinion has less flavor. And finally, 1 tablespoon of rosemary. These flavors are gonna work so beautifully together, you will never, ever even consider having stuffing from a box. Our prep's all done. Grab a large skillet and we're gonna melt half a cup of butter over medium heat. A dainty half cup or 113 grams of unsalted butter. Just because it's a savory bread pudding or stuffing doesn't mean it is not gonna be rich and delicious. And part of that's the butter. It really coats everything here and you're gonna taste things so much more. That's why it's so important as an ingredient. If you wanted to add some additional flavor, you could always use a half cup of browned butter. Browned butter is such an autumnal flavor and it's really delicious. Once the butter's melted, we're gonna toss in our celery, garlic, and onions. Stirring occasionally, you're gonna cook this for about 10 minutes or until everything's nice and softened. It'll be very fragrant as well. If your pan's pretty full, it might be easier just to give a couple flips, really move things around. So just about 10 minutes later, this is smelling amazing. And before, I forgot to mention, if you wanted to, instead of onions, you could use leeks. Oh my gosh, I love the taste of leeks. So either is gonna work well. I would just dice the leeks up into a similar shape. I'm gonna take this off heat for just a minute and this gets transferred into our big bowl full of bread. Once my bread was dried out, I transferred it all into a huge bowl. Everything is gonna go into this bowl, so make sure it's large. And make sure to change your oven temperature from 300 to 375. Pour the veggies and butter all over your bread. Our pan's still pretty hot. We're gonna put it back onto medium-high heat now. And now it's time to add the sausage into our sausage stuffing. So you wanna have 1 pound of sweet or spicy Italian sausage. Of course, there should be no casings involved here. So if the sausage you're using has casings, just remove them. Plop that right in. And right now we wanna break the sausage up, brown it, and cook it through. There's only a little bit of butter left in our pan right now, so at first you might think, oh, it looks kind of dry, but there is so much fat in the sausage, it'll render out and work out great. Your sausage should be cooking for about 5 to 6 minutes over a medium-high heat. Everyone's cooktop is different, so really just make sure it's browned through and there's no pink parts left. Fully cooked. Smells good already. You know, the sausage is definitely going to be one of the primary flavors you have here. So I would make sure to use a sausage you enjoy. And if you don't usually use an Italian sausage, go to your local market, get a couple of tryouts and cook them up, taste them, and make sure you're using one you love if this is for a special occasion like Thanksgiving. I broke my sausage up into wonderful, manageable pieces. You don't want to have a bite of stuffing that's just sausage. It should be a little bit of everything. And it looks like it's nicely browned through. So we're gonna take it off heat. And the sausage, along with those delicious drippings, gets poured into that bowl as well. Get that all in there, including all those brown bits on the bottom, and all the fennel and red pepper from our delicious sausage. Right now we're gonna season this with half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of cracked black pepper, and this, of course, is your starting point. We're not gonna season this fully until later on because we haven't tasted it yet, and all the sausages have different levels of spice and saltiness, so you don't wanna go overboard. And of course, we haven't forgotten about all of our beautiful, delicious chopped herbs. Do your best to fold this together now. So this is my second biggest bowl, and maybe I should have used my very biggest. That's fairly well mixed. We can finish it up later in the pan. Now I have 2 cups of chicken broth in a large measuring cup, and here's the deal. If I just poured that in, it would be a soggy mess. You need to have some eggs to turn it into that savory custard. So we're gonna add 2 eggs right into our broth. Grab a whisk, and just mix it up. Chances are you used broth out of a container. That's fine. You should have 2 more cups of broth in reserve because depending on the bread you use, and how dry it is, you might want to add more broth into the mixture. This is a great starting point though. Nice and mixed up. Back to our bowl. I'm switching out to my biggest bowl because it was just gonna be awkward. Now we're gonna slowly pour this mixture over our bread while we mix slowly. There we go, just pour and mix so everything's getting some good coating. Okay, let's give it a good toss. So right now my bread is nicely moistened on the outside and the inside is still like kind of dry. That's how I like my stuffing. I don't want it to be super wet. If you want yours to be wetter, you'll just add up to a cup more broth. These pieces, they're all like wet on the outside and a little squishy, but the inside has some structure still. Now you want to grab a casserole dish, 9 by 13 or so, and give it a little bit of butter just so nothing gets too sticky. And it's time to transfer things in. So gather your strength and let's get this together. Transfer all this delicious stuff right into your buttered casserole dish. Today I'm using a casserole dish that's slightly smaller. I'd like to have mine get some height so it really gets kind of toasty on the outside. But a 9 by 13 will be just a little bit shallower. My sausage stuffing is ready to go into the oven, but if you want to make this way in advance, you can freeze your stuffing for up to 1 month. Just make sure it's really well covered, and your leftovers will last about 4 days in the fridge. If you're reheating this from the fridge, 350 for about 20 minutes or until it's warmed through. If you're heating from frozen, thaw overnight or for up to 2 days in the fridge, and then you're gonna pop it into the oven. You can also add a splash of broth to keep it from drying out. When you're ready to bake it, set it on the counter for an hour to warm up, then pop it into the oven. You might need to add 10 to 15 minutes of additional bake time though. I'm gonna bake mine right now though, so it'll go into the oven 375 for 25 to 30 minutes or until the top is nice and golden and the center is warm. In you go. Once baked, you are ready to enjoy. Just so good. The sausage has so much flavor, so this one has a lot of fennel and pepper, and it really gives you a lovely depth of flavor with that perfectly baked bread. I hope you get a chance to make this recipe, and if you like my videos, hit that subscribe button and check out my Thanksgiving playlist.